Politics and Prose timing is indeed exquisite for a number of reasons. One is it is almost exactly now 2 years ago from the day in which I finished the first draft of the strategic review for President Obama on American policy towards Afghanistan and Pakistan, and we began the laborious process of vetting it through the United States government. It was almost exactly 2 years ago that I flew with the President on Air Force One to Los Angeles to go over it with him during the spare time he had on a 5-hour flight. At this point, I'm impelled to give my standard disclaimer. My views today are solely my views. They're not the views of the Obama administration or of the President, and please do not confuse whatever I have to say with the views of the Obama administration. Secondly, of course, as you noted in the introduction, we are in the midst of a major crisis between the United States and Pakistan. The deadly embrace has become literally quite deadly in the last month. Raymond Davis, who is apparently an American diplomat, I don't know who he works for. Don't ask me who he works for. I can't confirm who he works for. Shot to death 2 Pakistani citizens. A 3rd Pakistani citizen was killed by another American driving a vehicle coming to his rescue. And in the weekend after those deaths, the widow of one of the 2 committed suicide because she believed that her government would not stand up to the United States of America. The family has subsequently said that if Pakistan gives Raymond Davis back to the United States, they will all commit suicide one at a time. Now, that may all be a bluff, but there aren't a lot of governments in the world who are going to call their own citizens bluff on a threat like that. We have high drama, we have spy versus spy, and it comes after an increasingly difficult relationship over the last several months. In December, the CIA's chief of station in Islamabad, the highest CIA officer in the country, was named in the Pakistani press, what we refer to as he was outed. He had to be pulled out of the country literally overnight. If that wasn't bad enough, the New York Times and the Washington Post, citing CIA sources on background, said he'd been outed by the Pakistani intelligence service, the Inter-Services Intelligence Directorate, or ISI. Now, I've been engaged in liaison relations with foreign governments for many years. This is not normal behavior. We don't usually do this. We don't usually out each other and then talk about it in the newspapers. Since the arrest of Mr. Davis, the President has said very clearly he is a diplomat and must be given diplomatic immunity. We have already canceled a trilateral Afghan-Pakistan meeting to work on cooperation in the war against al-Qaeda and the Afghan Taliban. Pakistani President Zardari's March visit to the United States is in jeopardy, and President Obama's promise to visit Pakistan in 2011 is clearly in jeopardy. And if this wasn't bad enough, if you listen carefully to spokesmen on both sides, there's a sense of doom and foreboding behind this relationship. Pakistan's Chief of Army Staff, General Kayani, was here last fall. When he went home to Pakistan, he said he was the most bullied man in the world. Again, that's not normal in mill-to-mill relations. And if you read carefully, there's clear concern in our government that there could be a 9/11 type mass casualty attack in the United States, datelined Pakistan at any time. Last May, we almost had one in Times Square. And there's concern there could be another Mumbai-style mass casualty attack in India, datelined Pakistan. And there's concern, and I write about it in my book, that Pakistan could actually become a jihadist state. That's thinking the unthinkable in terms of Pakistan. It's not the most likely outcome by far. It's not imminent. It's not inevitable. But for the first time in Pakistani history, I think it's become a real possibility. The stakes here couldn't be larger. Pakistan is the sixth most populous country in the world with 180 million people. It will soon, within a decade, be the fifth largest country in the world. It is the second largest Muslim country, and it will surpass Indonesia within a decade. It has the fastest growing nuclear arsenal in the world. Today, Pakistan is on the cusp of becoming the fifth largest nuclear weapons power in the world. For those of you who don't walk around with a little cheat sheet, who are the top 5 nuclear powers? They're, of course, us, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom. Pakistan is close to surpassing the United Kingdom, and it's on a trajectory that will make it the 4th largest nuclear power in the world. And Pakistan is the host to more terrorist groups than any other nation in the world. For a square kilometer, you can't find more terrorists than in Pakistan, with the possible exception of the Gaza Strip. And Pakistan has an extraordinarily complex relationship. On the one hand, it has been the patron of many of these terrorist groups. The group that attacked Mumbai in 2008, Lashkar-e-Taiba, is a wholly owned subsidiary of the ISI. And yet it is at war with others, the Pakistan Taliban, and it is an extremely violent war. Last year, there were over 2,000 terrorist attacks in Pakistan. Somewhere near 10,000 Pakistanis died or were wounded. So how did we get here? Well, that's the subject that I try to address in The Deadly Embrace. And I try to do it by looking at 3 narratives and see how they interconnect with each other. The first narrative is Pakistan's own internal development. The second is the U.S.-Pakistani bilateral relationship. And the third is the rise of the global jihad, what we think of here in America as al-Qaeda, but which is in fact a much larger movement of like-minded organizations who share the same goals, if not the same leadership, as al-Qaeda. Let me briefly turn to each. Pakistan's internal history is a fascinating story, extraordinarily complex. At one level, there is a struggle between those who created Pakistan, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who had a vision of a Pakistan that was going to be a modern, democratic, largely secular state that would look a lot like England in the Indus River Valley. Against him from the start were Islamic extremists who in fact originally opposed creation of Pakistan because they wanted to control all of the subcontinent and have now come around to waging war against India. Then there's the struggle between the civilian government and the military. Pakistan has a military which has seized power 4 times in some 60 years. One of those who seized power, General Zia-ul-Haq, rightly deserves the title of the grandfather of the modern global Islamic Jihad in the 1980s. He was our partner in the war against the Soviet Union. We'll come back to that. These various struggles interact constantly in Pakistan, making it a very unpredictable mix. And Pakistani history is also littered with murders and assassinations. From the first prime minister, who was murdered in 1948, to Benazir Bhutto, who was murdered only 3 years ago, to the murder of the governor of Punjab just a few weeks ago. In most cases, we don't know who did it. It's like we're reading an Agatha Christie novel, and we keep waiting for Hercule Poirot to assemble everyone together and tell us who did it, but they never do. They're all mysteries. The U.S. bilateral relationship is a roller coaster. We've gone up and down. We've been best friends, most allied country in the world, and we've been at each other's throats. If this was a soap opera on television, it would get #1 ratings because the drama is so high. All the ups are built around great secret projects. The U-2 base in Peshawar that flew over the Soviet Union, Nixon's trip to China, the war against the Soviets, and more recently, the war against al-Qaeda. All of these secrets, of course, don't remain secrets for very long at all. They all come out. One standard, though, is that the United States consistently has always supported and endorsed the military dictators.